Hey guys, what's up, and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I was originally planning to actually be discussing my feelings and thoughts on the patch 5.2 changes as of the live letter update that we got a few days ago. But the problem with that is, even after multiple days of thinking about how I feel on that, unfortunately I'm still kind of conflicted, and so I'm gonna actually break up the patch 5.2, kind of like my thoughts on it and what's going on, into separate videos. But of particular note is the buffs to the Red Mage, and I think that this actually highlights a massive underpinning of concern to the game, especially for a lot of endgame players. So the Red Mage is planned to get a whole host of changes that are purely buffs, especially on their damage, and this is going to impact both their single target and their area of effect damage. So some examples that were brought up during the live letter is Flesh is going to be buffed, Contra-Sex damage fall off is now removed, Ver Thunder and Ver Arrow's potency is going to be buffed, and then the buff is going to be done mostly through the enhanced Jolt trait adjustments. So however you boil it down, fact is, until we actually have the raw numbers, which is going to probably be released the night of the patch, is that this is all kind of up in the air and we're not sure just how big of buffs they are. But you know what, if they're mentioning them, they're probably going to be something pretty significant. But someone's going to be asking the question of why? Why is this significant? Why did I say that this is an underpinning of the game? And that's because the Red Mage is a heavy utility class. Whether you want to break it down into their revive or their raid buffs, this Red Mage brings a whole lot of utility. So for anyone who is new to this channel, new to Final Fantasy XIV, or doesn't play Red Mage offers a host of utility. First of all, they have a revive that they can spam instantly, and in this game, being able to instantly revive an ally is probably the biggest utility that you can have. It makes the Red Mage extremely useful even in high tier raiding, regardless of their current quote-unquote lower damage, because it allows you to revive during progression when someone's not really familiar with the fight, and that person can be brought back instantly. This is extremely important to the game because most classes like the Summoner can revive. It's the only other DPS that can revive, but they are caught really on either a 7-second cast timer, or they can use their swift cast ability, which is actually part of their opener rotation and should not be used this way, to revive someone else. Alternatively, both of your healers that are already MP stressed, because reviving costs a whole lot of MP, and we do not have any ways to restore our own team's healer MP anymore. We used to be able to, on ranged DPS, give them MP, but that's gone as of this expansion. And they also are bound by that either 7-second timer or using swift cast to do that. So however you break that down, basically the Red Mage's revive is super essential for progression. But even outside of progression, just having the Red Mage there as a backup in case something does go wrong, and I mean, even if you have a farm party, things go wrong, people make mistakes, that's just the way that life is. And then a Red Mage helps you really elegantly recover from that. But further from that, the Red Mage also brings forth Cure ability, and they actually can spam like a 600 potency Cure onto a tank if the healer's not there, or to themselves if the healer's not paying attention to them. Basically, this is one of the most flexible forms of outside of healing in the entire game. I think that the only thing that could maybe be comparable is Clemency for the Paladin, but Clemency for the Paladin costs a lot of MP and in reality is going to chunk their rotation, so it is strongly advised Paladin doesn't, whereas the Red Mage can basically spam this if they see something wrong. Obviously it's going to be a hit to their DPS, which is not good, but they still have the option. Then lastly, but certainly not least, is the Red Mage's Embolden ability, which I do believe that a lot of people overlook because they see the damage fall off for it, and basically what it does is it increases your own magic damage by 10%, and then physical damage dealt by party members by 10%. And so that's going to impact your ranged DPS, that's going to impact your monk, that's going to impact your samurai, and very much lately it is becoming more common for teams to basically shift to being mostly physical, and so what you're really getting, and tanks, you're gonna have 2 tanks in a raid, they're also physical damage, so this buff is actually pretty significant. I know that basically it loses 2% of the buff, but regardless, this is definitely a strong buff, and on a only like 120-second timer, so once every 2 minutes, it's definitely something worth considering. I mean, for anyone that wants numbers, Embolden actually gives a buff. I'm just picking off one random Titan Savage group, a 859.1 DPS just from this buff. And to compare it to other buffs, like let's look at the Dragoon's Battle Litany. So the Battle Litany buff, for anyone who's not really familiar, is actually considered one of the most powerful raid DPS buffs in the entire game. However, when we're picking up this group, it is giving 647.8 potency, and then the Dragoon also is known for its other buff called Left Eye, and that is giving 218.2 DPS. So roughly with the Embolden from the Red Mage, you are getting like about the same as the Dragoon, where their buffs are like super high. And so yeah, I'm gonna say that people are severely underrating what the Red Mage can do when it comes to utility this way. Okay, now let's reel it back. Why is this a bad thing? Because Red Mage, yeah, absolutely, it can stand on its own, nice. But the problem comes when we look at how raid groups and group compositions mostly form. So generally in Final Fantasy XIV, you want one of every type of role. You're going to want one healer, you're going to want at least one tank, you're going to want to make sure that you have one melee DPS, one range DPS, and one magic DPS. And so what this means is that the Red Mage is competing with the Black Mage and the Summoner for their spot. And that generally speaking, groups are going to tend to prefer to have 2 melee DPS from what I've noticed. I mean, of course, every group composition can clear all content, massive disclaimer, but they're generally going to prefer to have 2 melee DPS rather than 2 caster DPS, generally speaking from my experience. But with Red Mage buffs coming, and all that utility, we now need to consider what about the classes that don't bring utility, and that would be classes like the Black Mage, the Machinist, and the Samurai. So these classes do not bring group buffs of their own. They cannot revive, and of course revive, as I said earlier, is considered the strongest utility in the game and can massively change the outcome of a fight. So if I pull up FF logs on Titan Savage for the 75th percentile today, I look at Red Mage and it has 13,324.82 DPS. And then I look at the Black Mage and it has 14,123.28 DPS. So the difference between those numbers is going to be 798.46, which, if we're being honest, is significant. That is not insignificant, but at the same point in time, it is so close that I'm feeling like we're really getting to the edge where players have already started to be like, should we be taking a Black Mage over a Red Mage? Maybe, maybe not. But the issue is, whenever you talk about giving a class with so much utility more damage, is that this question that people are already asking in raiding communities, should I be replacing the Black Mage with a Red Mage, becomes a lot clearer. Oh, if you're only offering 400 more DPS by going a Black Mage, then why are we taking you as a Black Mage? Switch to Red Mage. And then likewise, that means that the Red Mage is going to completely supersede the Black Mage and completely replace them. Obviously there comes things like play what you want to play and all that, but we're talking about what is the perk of playing a Black Mage over Red Mage if the Red Mage does basically the same damage? And I mean, that question might seem cold to ask, because I think that that's just like very much looking at it just from the numbers perspective, but in reality, why would you? Because the Red Mage just offers so much more utility. To me, this is like if the Dancer dealt as much damage as the Machinist. The Dancer brings a lot more utility, whether that be through their Curative Waltz, which is a massive stackable, really powerful heal that helps healers bounce back, whether it be through their healer improvisation ability that massively increases healer output, or whether that be through their ability to dance around the field. And then at that point it becomes, well, I wouldn't play the Machinist because I simply get more from the Dancer. But I mean, we're talking about little bit of utility there. We're not talking about Revive. When we're talking about Revive, the king of utility, the question becomes much more bleak for the Black Mage, and I think at this point it's worth considering, oh my gosh, the Black Mage, if they don't get heavy buffs to make their damage even higher, which is already pretty high, but higher from here, the Red Mage is just going to knock the Black Mage out. And so when we talk about the balance concerns and go and say, oh, quote unquote, the Red Mage does too little damage, okay, relative to the Black Mage, where the Black Mage doesn't have Revive, it doesn't have the ability to heal teammates. Okay, so as the Red Mage gets closer to the Black Mage is now made irrelevant. But the higher the Black Mage goes from the Red Mage makes it so that people say, oh, the Red Mage does too little damage. Actually, I want to say one thing for a quick hot second here, is if the Red Mage does too little damage, let's pull up those logs again for Titan Savage at the 75th percentile. Dancer and Bard both are about 500 DPS lower than the Red Mage. And then the Machinist is only 100 damage more, or DPS more, than the Red Mage. So if we're looking at buffing the Red Mage, why are we not looking at buffing the ranged DPS, especially the Machinist, where the Machinist absolutely does not have revive? I mean, am I the only one seeing this and feeling like I'm going crazy here? I mean, if we're buffing the Red Mage's damage already, where the Red Mage is already doing better than 2/3, significantly better than 2/3 of the ranged DPS category, is the ranged DPS category not weak enough? I mean, am I the only crazy person that's seeing these numbers here? And I mean, the Red Mage also brings revive. Am I alone in this? But I digress, because the main focus of this video is the Black Mage. If the Red Mage gets this DPS buff and it shrinks the gap even further, it's going to be very hard to take any Black Mage into raid, because, sorry, you don't revive, and whether you need the revive or not, you're still going to want to have that backup, because, you know, when stuff hits the fan, you never expect stuff to hit the fan, but you know what? You're really happy if you took precautions to recover from that. And so I think that that's the main concern of this video, is when you have something with so much utility, what should the gap be? And people are still taking the Red Mage, even in its current weak state before these buffs, quote-unquote weak state, to these raids. Like, if you look up Titan Savage and then you filter on FF logs for Red Mage, they're not insignificant. They're not there. The Red Mage is definitely there. And so when it comes to buffing the Red Mage further, I'm like, okay, me as a ranged DPS, I'm feeling a little irrelevant if the Red Mage is doing about as much damage as the Machinist, which is the highest ranged DPS, and they bring revive. I'm feeling a little insecure about my spot on the raid, if I'm being honest. But it's like the Black Mage, really worried about them. Anyhow, that is all my thoughts are for this. I feel really conflicted. I think that probably comes through loud and clear, because it's just like, I want to see Red Mage players be happy with the damage they deal. But at the same point in time, what is the trade-off? How much should you be able to revive then? Should we even be looking at the revive mechanic being on the Red Mage? But mind you, that's a defining trait of it. I don't know. I mean, I'm obviously just one person, and I don't even have the answers for this. I don't even really have a concrete opinion on this. But I'm wondering what everyone else's thoughts are. Anyhow, any likes, subs, and all the rest are super duper appreciated, especially as a smaller content creator. It honestly means the world to me to have more subs and likes. It really is honestly inspiring. Anyhow, I really do want to hear what you are thinking in the comment section below, because yeah, I'm just one person, and I'm really curious, because I think that this is a problem that should be, it should be looked at much closer, because this, however you cut it, one class is going to completely override the other. Anyhow, that's all for this video. Take care.